The big issue is people are outraged, and I understand that. I'm outraged. It's not just George Floyd's killing, although that's enough to outrage a nation. It's George Floyd, it's Ahmaud Arbery, it's Breonna Taylor, all just in the past 3 months. It's 30 years of Rodney King and Amadou Diallo and Sean Bell and Abner Louima, and the same case in states all across this nation, where only the name changes, but the color stays the same. You then had the first press conference by prosecutors looking at the Minneapolis situation that frankly raised more questions than it answered. And the real issue is the continuing racism in this country. And it is chronic, and it is endemic, and it is institutional. And it speaks to a collective hypocrisy. We're very good in this country at telling other people how they should live their lives and how they should act, how we preach a high standard, but we still discriminate on the basis of color of skin. That is the simple, painful truth. But this is a moment for truth. Now, at the same time, it is equally true that violence never works. How many protests have we had? How many nights have we gone through like last night? How many times have we burned down our own businesses, our own neighborhoods, and our own communities? Burning down your own house never works and never makes sense. Burning down your own struggling businesses, people who are trying to bring back the community, never makes sense. It dishonors Mr. Floyd's death. Mr. Floyd was not violent. Mr. Floyd was compliant. Mr. Floyd wasn't even charged or accused of a violent crime. There was no violence. That's what makes the killing more outrageous. When you are violent, it creates a scapegoat to shift the blame. It allows the President of the United States to tweet about looting rather than murder by a police officer. How do you use the energy to mobilize people to actually reform society and make things better? And don't tell me that we can't change. Because we know we have and we can. Change comes in a moment when the stars line up. It's not easy, but when the stars line up and the people are ready to change, they can change. We have seen it happen in this state and in this nation. We created a new civil right in this nation for the LGBTQ community. We passed marriage equality, and we said we will no longer discriminate when it comes to marriage and telling people who they can love and who they can't love. After the Sandy Hook massacre, when people saw the madness of an assault weapon killing children, we passed common sense gun reform in this state. In the decades of trying, when we had record income inequality, and people said this is enough, and enough is enough, that's when we passed free college tuition. And we passed a minimum wage where people can actually live decently. People can change. And we have seen that lesson over the past 92 days as we've been dealing with this coronavirus. Demand that every public school provide the same level of funding for a child so we don't have two education systems in this nation, one for the rich and one for the poor. There is no reason and no excuse today for any child to live in poverty. We know that. Demand that change. And if our government leaders won't do it, or can't do it, or don't know how to do it, then you vote them out. That's how you make change. Most Americans are good, fair-minded, decent, kind, loving individuals. We need to mobilize the best in our people rather than allowing the worst. But don't lose the passion. Don't lose the outrage. Be frustrated. But be smart and be directed and be constructive and destructive. Help your community. Don't hurt your community. Be a laser and focus on real positive change. That's how this moment becomes a different moment in the history books. I would even go further. I would say now is the moment to say, I want equality in education. This is ludicrous and repugnant that you have some school districts that spend $36,000 on a child's education and some school districts that spend $13,000 on a child's education. How do you justify that the children of the rich get a much better education than the children of the poor? How is that fair at all? Well, you don't understand. It's hard politically to do that. Well, I understand it's hard politically. I also understand it's the right thing to do. I understand that. Well, the political system, too bad. Then elect a new political system. That's what I say. That kind of reform can be done by political will. How can you justify any child in America living in poverty? How can you do that? Any child. Well, it's hard politically. I understand it. I've been battling these things as governor. I would welcome an empowered citizenry that says, yes, we demand equality of education funding. I would welcome it. I proposed it every year. I can't get it. Be specific about the changes you want made and focus that energy. Make it a laser and actually effectuate change. Well, how does George Floyd become different than Rodney King?
speaking to over the last 2 weeks feel that the government is at fault for their situation, specifically people in poverty, with what's going on with the pandemic, because a lot of people were forced out of work and now they're waiting for unemployment, and it's been 3 months and they haven't gotten any money. We have people calling our news station in tears saying that they can't get through to the unemployment line, and they're saying specifically something this state government can do to help them is to open in-person unemployment lines and make sure these people get their money, because what I'm hearing from people is this state of unrest that a lot of these folks that we're seeing are in. They're just desperate. They were already poor. Now they were forced out of work. Now our unemployment system is backed up. They can't get through. So they don't just blame police. They blame government as a whole.
I understand. You're right. And they do blame government as a whole. And this is a very tough circumstance for everyone. And look, it's not a coincidence that the unrest happens in the middle of the pandemic, right? Those are not separate situations. There's tremendous stress on everyone. This isolation of people, the lack of social interaction has created a lot of mental health stress. I think that's true, and that's a fact. And the explosion we saw last night, and we'll probably see again tonight, I think it has many sources of energy coming into that. And what is the direct relationship between 90 days of close down and coronavirus and unemployment and fear and isolation, and then the George Floyd killing as an accelerant to an already highly stressful situation? More sophisticated minds than mine would have to figure out. So it is all of that. Yes, I understand. On the unemployment benefits, the state administers federal unemployment benefits. The federal government has many rules before people qualify for funding. We're not in a position to tell people line up and I will give you a check. It's not that simple. The money is not give anybody who asks funding. They have to meet certain criteria. The federal government has a whole list of criterion that have to be met before they can get the funding. Most of the people who are still waiting for checks now have issues that have to be reviewed or investigated. I understand this moment, but let's remember the next moment. You're going to be sitting in the same chair 3 weeks from now, and you're going to have the same indignation in your voice when you say, how did the state give out $100 million wrongfully in unemployment benefits, who defrauded the government and actually were living in wealth? How did you do that? You're going to have the same indignation. Okay.
Because you said before that some people were defrauding the unemployment system. People can't get through just to get basic questions answered to see if they qualify. They've made their full-time job trying to get through to unemployment. So they're saying it's at a point of desperation where can we do lines with social distancing where I can get my question answered, where I can find out a timeline of when I'm going to get my money. I mean, Governor, people are literally calling our news station crying and saying that their families are starving and they have to borrow money from people.
I understand. You want to answer on
the progress? We'll look into that option. It's a good idea. Great. We'll look into the option.